Hello everyone, it's Dr. A. This is part 2 of my lecture on the Renaissance in Quattrocento, Italy. And we begin here with Andrea Verrocchio. Andrea Verrocchio also did a David. The last portion of this we saw Donatello's David. And it's perhaps one of the greatest masterpieces of all time, some people say, but it definitely has a more robust feel to it. I think that Donatello's David is just as important. I when people say that kind of stuff, I'm like, it's hard to say what's the greatest thing of all time, but certainly this one would be more well known and also more accepted. Verrocchio's David is definitely more disciplined and more suited, some people say, to this topic. David would be a very, very big theme for many artists in this period. And with the Renaissance, there was a lot of them made. This is definitely here his most well-known piece, some people say. But maybe we need to look at other things that Verrocchio did. His David is certainly up there, and as you can see, it's also a bronze like Donatello's. But for some people, it's this work for the statue of Bartolomeo Caglione that makes Verrocchio such an important name in the history of the Renaissance. He has captured here the person who is scandalously, for some people, not some equestrian statues were mostly for people who were like leaders in the Roman world, but he is a condottiere, so he's like a mercenary, but he was for a very long time the general-in-chief of the Venetian Republic, and that's where this piece is located at. He is a pioneer of field artillery tactics, and he was really important in that he protected the city of Venice, and they loved him, and so this is considered one of the finest equestrian statues of the Italian Renaissance. Caglione himself was a noted patron of the arts, and it's a beautiful piece. If you ever see it, it's quite high up. It's in Venice. It's very striking. The intensity of his face, that kind of driven look. It's a very delicately carved piece here. When you see, well, it's not carved. It's a bronze piece as well. You see that beautiful detail and technique, and it deserves to be considered one of the big equestrian statues of the period. In painting, the lingering effects of the Byzantine influence on art in the West is definitely seen in Gentile da Fabriano, his altarpiece in the Adoration of the Magi. It's in the Strozzi Chapel, and it's still tempera on wood. We don't have that oil thing going on these pieces. If you look at it, it's real gold, and he used real gold and he painted over it. It is a very complex piece, and in the predelle, so that's underneath it, you see all kinds of things happening, and if you pay attention to it, the details are really almost a narrative. Look here, and you can see this. It's kind of like, it makes you want to laugh a little bit. It's the dog in the foreground who's looking back at the horse who's about to step on him. It's like Gentile is this great observer of what really happened, and the Magi are the subject, but they don't wear the ancient clothing, they're dressed very exotically. And again, he's telling us some really interesting stories we can see here in the travel. This is underneath their travels, how they got there, how exotic everything looked. And I think a lot of people think this is too much. There's too much visual abundance, if you will. But he is making something that you're not going to be looking at just one time. And so he is really giving us something we can look at again and again and again and again. All the gold that's in this is to show off his patrons, riches. Certainly the Strozzi Chapel was a really, really decorated place, if you will. And the real gold achieves a kind of subtle lighting effect. So you have to appreciate that too. Look at that. This is the patron. He puts him in here. And look, you can see here the person bending down and putting on the stirrups on this person. In the predella is as well the flight into Egypt. And so the whole story is encapsulated in this piece. Oh, this is the patron. I'm sorry. I don't know why I thought that one was there. And he's holding a falcon because the falcon was the symbol for his family. Following Gentili da Fabriano, we have probably one of the most innovative painters, and that is Masaccio. In the Brancacci Chapel, he shows off his excellence, and you can see here the different paintings and where they're located at. It looks like a very, 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 very small and descriptive. It's worth going to look at this, by the way. And the patron who had this chapel built, Brancacci, he was a descendant of Pietro, and that he had been the Florentine ambassador to Cairo. He hired Masaccio's teacher to do this, but his teacher had to leave, and so Masaccio was the person who finished it. And Masaccio was younger, 18 years younger, and he really showed people some of the Renaissance perspective that would be the new norm, if you will. No more adhering to that kind of, if you will, I'm trying to think of how they use space. It's just very different. This is a very controlled use of space. Let's call it that way. He continues on Giotto's path with this symbolic vision, if you will, and a greater realism. And so if we look at the images, it is more like the story, and you can see the events unfolding. There's not a lot of abstraction. Expulsion from the Garden of Eden. We see it's a dramatic and intense piece. It is definitely not the international Gothic style we'd seen before. They're eloquent figures. Adam covers his face in desperation, and Eve covers her nudity with shame, and she cries out in pain. Adam's damp and sticky hair foreshadow that on earth he'll struggle with hard labor and dirt. Yeah. Her stance, by the way, is very much Venus Pudica, the modest Venus, if we look at that. His baptism of the neophytes is a delicate application of colors for the shadows. And probably one of the most famous pieces seen here is St. Peter healing the sick with his shadow. Masaccio's application of perspective, unified lighting, use of chiaroscuro, and skill in rendering figures naturalistically establish new traditions in this new Renaissance style. The young Michelangelo was actually very, very influenced by this particular series of paintings. Unfortunately, Masaccio was called to Rome just as an end to that, and at the age of 27, he died there. I think he died of illness. Yeah, it was illness. I was just trying to remember. When we come to Fra Filippo Lippi, though, we have a very different type of person. He was a priest, sorry, who was ordained in 1434. He lived for most of his life around Florence, and he had a scandalous life. He knew Ghiberti, Masaccio, and he knew all these people, but he is definitely much more well-known in the period as far as his personal trials and tribulations, let's see. He painted in a very naturalistic style, and his most famous piece is the Madonna and Child with Angels. So let me tell you what he's done here. He has brought into now this image a sensual beauty, but it was, in his words, to magnify the spiritual. But let me tell you, there's not a lot of spiritual here as far as what's going on behind here. We think this was, or pretty sure it's Lucrezia Butti, and she was a real person and a real place, and she was a nun who lived in the city of Prato. The Fra Filippo Lippi saw her one day in 1456. He was 50 by that time, by the way, and she was 21, and he was in love with her instantly. He would be so in love that he abducted her, and by pleading and groveling and begging, she finally agreed to renounce her vows and become his mistress. 9 months later, almost to the day their first child was born. The baby boy is like that sealed the deal. So he uses his mistress, a former nun, as a model for the Virgin. And then this, they believe, is that child that was born first, and the baby is another child that they had. His second son was Alessandro. He dabbled in other things like forgery and embezzlement. He was nearly thrown into jail, but he was saved by Cosimo, who believed that the artistic merit outweighed the artist's criminal activity. But in this, we see the holy blended with the unholy. That's always interesting to me. In Piero della Francesco, we may have perhaps one of the greatest artists of the time. He is today much better known than he was in his own day. He was a mathematician, but he used math to help create this piece, the resurrection. And it is considered a striking image because of the way the risen Christ holds the banner in hand from the tomb. His figure depicts an iconic fixity and this is often described as one of the best pieces of art ever done. We see again the human and divine blended here. His work today has been re-looked at again and again and again, and even Kenneth Clark, who's a famous kind of art historian, agrees that he is definitely the underappreciated artist of the period. All right, this is the end of the second part of this lecture, and so we will pick up in the third part with Ghirlandaio. I will see you there.